So everyone is saying that AI is changing software development, but it is actually making things better or just making them faster?
Welcome to Human in the Loop. It's a weekly podcast where two builders cut through the noise of the AI hype cycle and talk about what actually matters. Today, we're joined by Mike Lyons and Greg Pfister from KaiRise to talk about where Agile still matters, where AI changes everything, and what great engineering organizations should look like over the next 5 or 10 years. Mike, Greg, welcome to the show. Who are you? What do you do?
Thanks, Matt. Oscar. Well,
Thank you.
I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Mike. It's such a treat to be with you guys today. But I work for KaiRise. Greg and I are business partners at KaiRise. But prior to that, we both worked for a global consulting firm, and we spent years consulting in the federal space and helping our clients understand better ways of working, sort of adaptive ways of working, or sometimes called agile ways of working. Prior to that, I worked for a global nonprofit where I did much the same, and then before that, I spent time in local government. So federal, state, and local government I've worked in, nonprofits I've worked in, and then before that, I was in the financial sector in Southern California. So had opportunities to kind of work all over the place and helping teams deliver better and faster. Greg, how about you?
Yep. Thanks, guys. Nice to meet you both. And like Mike said, worked for within the federal space, a lot of government contractors. My background's been more in the IT tech side, software engineering, and a lot of actual federal startups that got acquired over the decades, actually. And the KaiRise evolution was really something that at our last consulting gig, most of what we were doing was trying to help folks learn, get educated, understand how to deliver well. So looking forward to the conversation, and let's jump in.
I don't hear you, Matt.
Sorry, I'm like so rookie today. So the past few episodes we've done like straight through, no cuts. Today's like, I'm sorry. Okay, 3, 2, 1. So thanks, Greg. I think today more than ever, this conversation is more important. AI has dramatically reduced technical bottlenecks, which traditionally has been the main bottleneck in software development and engineering in general, right? Like it's always been easy to come up with ideas, but it's been hard to actually execute on those ideas in a meaningful way. So I'm glad you guys came because just like I said, it's such an important topic, and so many people keep asking, like, what do we do? Like our engineers, they're running out of things to work on. They've been working so hard, and like we see all these tickets, but we don't see the changes. So like we got no backlog, we've got no roadmap. What do we do? And it's just more evident than ever that this bottleneck has been shifting, and it's been shifting for a while. So thank you guys for coming. So Mike, you already told us a bit about your professional journey, you and Greg as well. I know you and we met actually when you were giving one of your Agile coaches. I'm actually IC Agile certified by Mike. And so how did you end up focusing on Agile and organizational transformation? How did that come to be?
Well, I think like a lot of people, it came through a pretty substantial failure. We like to say that failure can be the best teacher, and I think that's probably true for, I know, the four of us. I would imagine that's true. We want to learn from those things, but for me, it was a very large government contract replacing the voter registration system for the state of Colorado. So many millions of users and highly regulated, lots of, it happens to be called Title I election law. It's like a book about this thing or whatever, multiple inches of regulation. But we took an approach to building that, which was a very traditional approach in the software world, which is let's just sit down and write down all the requirements. And if we just write them down really, really well, then the engineers will be able to build the thing we wrote down exactly as we wrote it down And then we can have somebody else who wasn't involved yet so far test that thing. And then we'll push everything out all at once to the users on September 30th. And we make that prediction 3 years earlier, September 30th. And we're going to do it for exactly $4.3 million and 48 cents. And it's going to take exactly 100 people and 4,000 hours of development and 3,242 hours of test. And we just lie to ourselves because none of that ever is true. It just hasn't been true. And so when September, whatever date I said, lands and we go live and nobody uses it, or they hate it, or worse, they like put up pirated sessions of the legacy system to find their stuff. Like, that's when you know you failed, and it was a multi-million-dollar like fail. Were we on time, on scope, on budget? Yeah. Oh yeah, man, I hit that date. I hit those requirements, Oscar. They wrote them all down real good, and we tested it, and it worked great. And then when they launched it and it got to the user's hands, they're like, well, what is this? And our response was, well, we built what you asked for. We built what you asked for, right? It's just turns out it wasn't what they need. And that was my like smack you in the head moment where I said, there has to be a better way. And just to wrap that story up, eventually in what was called version 2 of that build, we took a different approach and did turn the, sort of correct that and right that ship. But it was in that moment that I walked by an IT conference room, saw a bunch of software developers in there. It's a software developers room because there's Mountain Dew cans and empty pizza boxes and it smells like feet. Like you just know that there's developers in there. And on the wall was plastered the Agile Manifesto, the 4 values of the Agile Manifesto. I remember reading those, going, working software with comprehensive documentation? Yeah, like that's better. We should have put working software instead of writing down the requirements all perfectly. Not that you shouldn't gather requirements. I'm not saying that. Just saying working software is more important, right? And then right on down the list. And Matt, I'm telling you, it was like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Like, there is a better way. And then, no kidding, we did use that better way to kind of right the ship the next time around. It was a version 2, if you will, and I mean today it's up and running. It's all fine. But that's how. Sorry for the long answer, but that's how I kind of got my intro to this whole idea.
It's a meaningful story, right? And kind of segue to Greg, right? You being the technical side of KaiRise, like how did you come to meet Mike? Like, are you actually interested in Agile, or are you just interested in like Mike's enthusiasm and what he brings to the table and trying to bring his vision to life? Or how did you guys' partnership come to be?
Well, let me take a little step back. But so I was on the other side of the fence that Mike just described. So I was on the engineering side, and frustrated with every sales guy and project manager agreeing to every client request, and then throwing it on our lap, going, well, yeah, September 30th. What's the big deal? You just got to code some stuff, right? So my journey, and I'll keep it short, was really in the early 2000s. I was looking at how to do continuous integration, and those kinds of things. It was before the DevOps marketing buzz came out. And I was more of a systems thinker. So I was looking at how do you automate? How do you smooth this out? How can we build more consistently, more reliably? I was used to the government world where you built things and then you threw it over to the independent verification and validation, IVMV, which was a whole nother crew that sometimes even made their own version of the requirements. And then they're judging whether we met our version of the requirements with their version of the requirements. And it was always a mess. So over time, we started moving into Agile from a technical perspective. The sprints, the ideas of Agile, really the first principles of Agile. And then my career moved more from coding and technology in that regard into leading engineers. And that is what moved me into then moving and leading organizations to be more effective, more agile, more of all those things. And in the government space, they are the epitome of not agile. And so it was a bit of this, square peg round hole challenge over the years. But I mean, I have actually seen progress. And but my career then started moving into how do we educate from a corporate or customer client perspective, not just Agile, the mechanics, but also the engineering. How do we do DevOps, CI/CD, automate tests, those types of things too. So I did a lot of the sort of the management leading in that. So when I was a part of a startup that we ran for about 7 years that got acquired by Accenture. And that was our step into the meeting Mike. We were growing the office in the San Antonio region. I needed someone that kind of understood what this lean agile idea was. But I remember chatting with you, Mike, that first time, and really, I'd say my general sentiment for agile coaches, this is going back 10 years ago, was it was the federal space was not the commercial space. It wasn't a startup space. It wasn't like you can do whatever you want. You have to play within the constraints of this hard contract, but you're also trying to get an organization to operate in a more lean, agile way. And it's very challenging. And it's almost like I'll interview someone like Mike and almost try to convince them not to take this job because it's going to be way harder than what you've been doing. So, but that was I don't know when that was, 7-ish years ago, maybe, Mike. And so from there,
more than that.
Yeah. Anyway, came on board. We did a lot of good things. And then I actually pitched an idea of like, well, man, the fundamentals, and we trained a lot of people internally, and the agile fundamentals was something that I felt like, man, we should be able to sort of turn this into a self-paced, go consume it. It's like a 101 course, right? It's not a master's level class here. And why can't we sort of turn this into something more consumable, easier for people to grab and get a hold of and use? Pitched it internally. Not a lot of traction, but not surprising. And then I said, well, what if we go and spin this off and I do it on my own? And work with HR to go figure that out. And me and Mike and actually one other partner at the time, we did this while we were full-time employees to get started. And since we've left our regular day jobs, and this is what we do on a regular basis. So that's the long version of how did I meet Mike, but why I think we complement each other really well.
Yeah, no, it seems like you guys fit together like perfectly to make this dynamic duo. So I guess, so looking back over your careers, right? What has changed the most, and what's stayed surprisingly constant? Like especially with this AI like boom that we're in right now. Either one, Mike or Greg, whichever one you think, or both.
I'll throw a thought out, and Mike, maybe you can follow up on it. So one of the challenges, there are many challenges with Agile, but one of the challenges always seemed to be, in my world, my experience, was that Agile played just in the tech part. And so you'd have a whole lot of upfront process of gathering requirement stocks getting signed off, all that kind of stuff, and then a long tail. I mentioned IV&V and things of that sort on the tail end, and the players doing Agile was simply the dev and that local dev group, and the reality was you could make that be the most effective and efficient group in the entire organization, except for that little window represented 20% of the entire what's it take to get something out the door, from the point of gathering requirements all the way to final approval to get it shipped. And so I think that problem still exists today. And I think AI just makes it even a bigger problem. It goes to your point, Oscar, where you mentioned we've got developers that don't have things to do. Well, no kidding. You've optimized the 20% part. We've got all of the other things we got to go figure out. So I don't know. That's just off the top of my head that one of the challenges is that it's the same problem. We just sort of made it more apparent.
I would add that one of the it's not an unintended consequence. That's not the right word. But one of the things that we're finding now is that executives can no longer be slow to set direction and vision for the organization. And if you're an executive and you kind of felt like maybe you didn't have to move as fast because those developers were just going to take 6 months to build the product anyway, you don't have that anymore. We build your product in minutes now. And so if you're not like on your game, knowing what do you want to do with this organization over the next, and by the way, let's give them a break too. You can't see very far. Your visibility into the future just kind of disappeared. So your 10-year plan, that's silly. Are you kidding me? Really? How about your 1-year plan? What do you think you want to do this fall? That's about all you have. And it's not like anybody's fault, but I'm just saying the sort of the management by objectives that we learned in the 90s and early 2000s, that playbook doesn't work in 2020 and beyond, simply because AI just won't let you do it. It's just unrealistic. The new models come out every 2 weeks and they're exponentially better than the last one. So forget about it. Like, first of all, your time horizons have shrunk, but also circling back to that first point, you have to lead. You have to give your IT team vision. What is it you want to accomplish? Because they're going to get it done tonight. So you got to be on your game. I think that the leaders need to really, really change.
Yeah, no, that's. Oh, go ahead, Oscar.
Yeah, I have a comment. Like, I think you hit the nail perfectly on something that we see, that the people who are pretty much not upgrading themselves for getting into the AI world is neither like the developers or the tech team. Really, it's more on a higher position, and they are still thinking this old way of like, oh yeah, let's see what we can do, let's make a plan, for 5 years, 3 years, and it's like, forget about it. Like, the world, we don't even know how it's going to look. If you will tell me 3 years ago that I will have a weird slave that I can talk to that will do all my work, or a lot of my work, I'll tell you that you're crazy and you're out of your mind, that you need to take your medications for sure. Like, there's no way, right? Like, there's no way. But the reality is, like, now that I'm doing this, and I'm like, damn, this is like, it's changing so fast and so strong that anything, like planning anything more than 6 months or even a year feels excessive, really. Like, 6 months is kind of like the sweet spot. And this hit home like really, really hard, because we have a client right now. We won't say names because we cannot. But their team, they didn't have like a single technical person in their team. Okay, they were like marketers, and they had several people, but not a single technical person. And when they came to us, they came already with an MVP, with some users. And that didn't exist. That didn't exist. Like, that was not a thing, okay? And we were really surprised, but very happy, because that means that team were like very, very focused, and they were like, okay, we don't know how to do programming, we don't know how to do none of these things, but we can pay cloud, we can pay these services, we can do some of these things on our own, right? And they had a proper MVP with some users already in software. And that was completely like, okay, everything changed. Like, everything changed for real. And this is like a great moment where we don't know like how teams are divided anymore, and how the tasks are supposed to be divided, right?
Yeah. No, and to build on that, right, and build on what Mike said, 10-year plans out the window, 5-year plans out the window, 1-year plans getting iffy, right? And it's this whole thing to also build on what Oscar said, right, and Mike. So engineering teams all 10x, 20x, like infinity x, right? And we've talked about this on the podcast before, and it's just like the leadership, they would say like, we need to get our engineers Claude, we need to get them GPT, we need to get them 10x. But like, we've called out, executives in our podcast and said, hey, are you 10x to keep up with them? Are you 5, 10, 20xing yourself in the same amount that you expect your engineering teams to 10x themselves, because you got to have a balance, right? And we've also even said that, 1 year, people are always planning their fiscal year like economics, right? And it doesn't work anymore. Especially like with the because you plan your 26, like your FY26, and then by Q1 you blow through it in tokens, then what? Like, so
That's
we
right.
actually said you should start doing quarterly planning at first, right? And then if you can fill that out, then you can start going to next quarter. But like you gotta like you said, you gotta shrink your time horizon, shrinking. You gotta also shrink your vision.
And that also forces you to then begin thinking about the economics of as a company. Because if you're on an annual cycle for your budget, which lots of, I mean, it's quite common, right? Fiscal year 27 begins on this date. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's how we've done business year over year over year. But even that model needs to be looked at and wondered about. In the government space, it's extremely difficult because their budgeting cycle can be multi-year. And so now you've got this constraint of budget. But in Musk organizations, Elon Musk organizations, their budgeting is done dynamically by AI. So they're reallocating and changing funds based on what's happening near real time. So, I mean, there's like two edges of that, right? Multi-year budget cycle to dynamically AI. And so for the rest of us normal people, maybe it's somewhere in the middle, not quite annual, maybe it's quarterly, Matt, something. But as leaders, like it's not just my engineers are faster. My finance team needs to be faster. Okay, now what about like my HR team? Oh my gosh, like I've got to hire people yesterday. So, why do we have a 3 month lead time on finding 3 months? What are you talking about? I'm gonna be done with the thing in 3 months. HR's got to change. Sales and marketing. Whoa, it takes us forever to build a marketing brochure. What are you talking about? You don't. Nobody has forever. So this isn't like an IT problem. So that's something else to consider, I think.
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're gonna like, if I were to come up with like an analogy, right? If you want to upgrade your car, you get a better engine. You probably need better tires. You probably need, a better body. You probably need better fuel injection. Like, you can't just upgrade one piece and expect it to run perfectly, right? So, Oscar, you want to take the next segment?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so here it gets like a little bit iffy, complicated, and a little bit blurry. This is in our own experience, which is that AI changed everything. Like everything that it touched, it became like so different that it's confusing a little bit, and my question will be, like, do you think that the agile principles are still timeless, or they kind of need to be adapted to this new world to be a little bit. I mean, Agile is dynamic on its own, but even more dynamic, really, because like it changed so much that should it be adapted into to the AI world, or do you think we can keep using the same principles?
Greg, I know, has an opinion
Yeah.
called first principle. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, to me, the first
here.
principles of Agile apply regardless if you want to call it Agile, right? The idea of faster feedback loops, more transparency, better visibility, engaging the clients more often. You can't not do that. You can call it whatever you want, but you have to engage in those basic fundamental ideas. Do you follow 2 week sprints and do daily stand-ups and all that? In some regards, I don't care. The reality is that an organization can sort of find their own path in those areas, but the point is you've got to find ways to get better, faster, quicker feedback. And feedback doesn't mean that I'm interviewing someone. It could mean that I'm building MVPs, just like that marketing group you mentioned, and they show up with it, right? They're getting feedback right away. And those are things that just weren't possible before. So, but the real challenge, and Mike's mentioned it earlier, is all of us have mentioned it. We need vision. We need to know where we're going. What's the flag? Where's the target? We may get there in meandering ways. And we need product management to set priorities and to help us get there and understand the market, because you got to make money. You can build anything. It's sort of like if everybody is given a Formula One race car and they can go as fast as they want, they're not going to get to their destination faster. They're going to get in a traffic jam faster. So where and how do we navigate where we're going, and how do we know what's going to generate revenue, right? That's the driver. We just had a presentation earlier in the week, and that was speaking with a product manager, and that was one of his key elements that drives his priority is, will this thing make us money or not? And I was like, I hadn't thought of it that way. I mean, when you think of a lot of, must-haves and things of that sort, now, laters, that kind of thing. And it's like, I think that's in the mix too. And it has to do with the vision and where you're going and how do you chart a course to get there.
Yeah, I would just build on that. I totally agree, and would say that it's we sometimes call it the lowercase a agile, not the uppercase A, capital A agile. The capital A agile is the the Scrum guide says that thou shalt have a daily sync called the daily Scrum, and thou shalt have a role called product owner, and you will have these time boxes. We call those sprints, anywhere from 1 week to whatever it is to something less than a month. And if you're not doing those things, then you're not doing Scrum. It's immutable. That's big A agile. I think that season has closed. I don't think it is closing. I think it's closed. Now that, and why do I say that? Well, because just go out on LinkedIn jobs and search for Scrum Master. Like, good luck. Like, there's just not. They're there. But I did a report on this not too long ago. I mean, they've just fallen off a cliff. That's just the reality of it. I mean, so big A agile, or any of those sort of frameworks, like SAFe, for example. SAFe is going through a major transformation right now. SAFe is the scaled out framework. Major transformation right now as they're trying to wonder what's next, because people were looking at the sort of large scale framework saying, it's too slow. We just can't do it that way. Now, to their credit, SAFe is making a dramatic, I mentioned, a pretty big change. So maybe they can, pivot and keep going forward. But I think it's about lowercase agility and adaptability and being able to flex with the market. There's a company out there, 37 Signals. They make multiple products. They're big products called Basecamp. 37 Signals, and the owners of that company, they don't do product roadmaps. They have a podcast on this recently called Rework. Highly recommend this. But they said, yeah, we don't, as a company, we just haven't done product roadmaps. We look at them as very specific lies that people make. And so we just don't do them. We build what's next. And they use short, they don't even use Scrum or anything like that. They use something that's called Shape Up. It's this basically, they look at things in 6-week increments. And that includes all phases of the entire company. So anyway, I think lowercase a agile is here to stay.
Okay, so something that we have noticed is that collaboration changed a lot. Just by the example I gave before, where this client, that none of them were technical, they were doing stuff. One experiment we have been running with clients lately is that when we sit down with them to discuss an idea that they want to develop or to build, instead of taking requirements, we do an MVP live right there. And we literally have a conversation, and we are prompting at the same time, right? Having this conversation, and we are slowly showing, kind of the general idea. And of course, as you can imagine, it's very different from what they are used to, because they are used to spend, sometimes sitting, writing requirements, and then having a designer, and all these extra steps that usually takes months, right? And we're removing all that, and it's okay, let's go into prototyping first, right? Let's go into prototyping right here in front of you and see if we are actually understanding each other to a proper level. And if we are, then we go into the high level prototype, pretty much, first a low level prototype and then the rest, right? So this is something that we are doing right now, and it's working, but I realize that this is a little bit weird for everybody in the beginning because it's a new thing that we're trying, right? So my question is like, has AI changed like what good collaboration looks like between like product managers, engineers, designers, and in general the stakeholders, right? Like it's something that you feel that change.
This idea of we can prototype something and build it quickly, so it absolutely changes our collaboration. But I'm not sure it changes it all for good either. Remember Steve Jobs said something similar to, people will know what they want when I show it to them. You remember this? It's like, so I think that's a good thing, right? Being able to prototype and show it to stakeholders, or even if you're a sort of product manager and a designer, you don't necessarily need an engineer to get to a prototype. It's not just engineers that can create prototypes, right? Now product managers have these tools in their hands, and it's not a sort of it's not on Mural or Figma. It's like, no kidding, it's for real, it's working software. So I think that's good. We do know what we want when we see it. Where it might just be maybe not so great is just the amount of noise it can create in the system. It's always been hard to find signal in a system, but now, like, are we populating with noise? And so one example of that, it's not necessarily in product space. It's just like, if you've been on any social platform recently, like we call it AI slop, I've heard this term. Like it's just like all this garbage out there. And then like it all starts to look the same. We were joking before we got on the call, right? Like it all starts to look the same. That website looks exactly like the 10 other websites I saw, or this post is like the same, like language, like your problem is not that you got a budgeting cycle. It's that you got to do this other thing. Like that's such AI slop nonsense. It's not this, it's that. In a world where, like, it's all gross. Like, so that's not like, that's the bad thing, I think, about this when it comes to like the speed and the collaboration and all that.
You describe whole LinkedIn with that, like literally.
Yeah. I'll chime in on that just briefly. I think that the AI definitely can help because you can get out in front. I think what Mike's saying is you run the risk of just making up stuff and wasting a lot of time going over things that isn't going to be what you're going to ultimately do. But it is a good path. So the reality, my experience is technology usually isn't the source of failure. It's usually the people and the communications amongst the parties that you need to work with, right? So that's still the challenge. But to your point, Oscar, I think presenting things by showing something goes way further than let me list it as 47 requirements and you review it and tell me if we're on track, right? So I think that helps us simplify life.
Like I imagine that, well, you, Greg, and me, like in the technical side, right? Like we can imagine a lot of things in our heads, like systems and how they're going to connect and all that, and I feel like probably we're the lucky ones because I know a lot of technical people that they have no idea how to explain anything at all, like ever, right? And it's very common having like deeply technical people who's like, hey, how this works? And they will just throw buzzwords at you like randomly, and you'll be like even more confused. And it's like, that's not how people communicate. Like speak something like English, out of plain English, right? Like, and this is something that right now I feel that the people who can actually have a proper conversation, they are way ahead than the people that cannot, and it's mostly because that communication now is directly with those engineers, right, and the stakeholders and all that, and you can just like have a better idea really of the requirements faster. At least from our point of view, it's kind of like, it's weird. It's like the 80% is getting smaller, but the last 20% is exactly the same size. Like it didn't change the size, but the first 80%, it kind of just shrink in some way, and the last 20% became now the bigger side, which is like kind of like
20 and 80.
Like they just flip sides, right? Like it's super interesting.
I got a question for Greg, if you don't mind me chiming in, Oscar, since we're on the topic of like the technical side of Agile, right? And I'll preface it with this like a very quick story, right? So I took my son to the arcade. He's only a couple years old. He's like 2.5, and they have a little basketball game for like kids, right? And they got a big basketball game for adults. I played the big basketball game for adults. I got like 250, 300 points, which is great. He got none. And then we went and played the little basketball game for kids. I got 999 points, right? So I want to ask Greg, right? So story points have always been like a contentious point in the agile process, right? Like story pointing. They don't mean anything. Every team's got different standards for story points, but it's like loosely considered a proxy for effort. So when an agent is writing the code, what is the team actually estimating when they're doing these story points? Are story points outdated? Is there like, do you see something new in the future? Because I see a lot of teams saying like, oh, we're doing in 2 weeks, we're doing like 2 months worth of work. Like our story points are 80 now, and like it used to be like 15. Like, do they mean even less now than they did before AI?
That's a good question. They really weren't intended to reflect level of effort. They're in large part they're trying to represent complexity and be relative, and this is the reason why it's hard for people to get their heads around it, right? Um, I hadn't thought about how AI and the productivity gains, like you're saying, is now are these stories now 80s and 120s as opposed to they used to be eight or something, you know? But I think if you took a step back on sort of a first principles idea, you're kind of trying to agree on, well, what do we consider easy? How do we rank that lower? And then relatively, how do we compare them to each other? That's all we're trying to do. And it really is, and it's a little bit, we might call it a vanity metric in the end, but what we're trying to do is just sort of get a pattern of, well, how many of these do we get done on a regular basis so that we can start to project a little bit going forward. So um, unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of great alternatives, right? I mean, I think that if you want to go estimate in hours, that gets hard as well. And then what are we estimating? Just individual engineering work, or the whole thing getting done into production? What is your definition of done? I mean, there's a lot of factors to it. So um, yeah, I don't know. I'd actually be curious. You guys are talking a lot more other engineers than ourselves. Like, where do they land in any of these agile practices? Or Mike, maybe you've got something to add to it. But I would probably just look at it in the same way we always have, except that now let's reset what a one is. What does it mean? You know?
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. Is a lot of these
Yeah.
teams that are bragging like, here's what we did last year, this time. Here's what we're doing this year, this time. They just never recalibrated.
Yeah. Yeah. And anecdotally, I mean, I remember teams looking at story points as a way to make it look like how successful they are. So they did score everything very high.
Yeah.
It was like, hey, we did 240 points. Well, that's just amazing. But they got, four tasks done, so to speak, right? So yeah, yeah. It's if you don't understand it, I think it's very gameable.
Well, earlier we were talking a little bit about how this the bottleneck shifted, and I think this could be a bit of a tie-in here. The bottleneck shifted, and it becomes the main sort of question I think today is, should we build it? That helps with all the noise in the system. That helps with, we were talking earlier about collaboration. Should we build it? And we really need to know from the leadership, are we headed in the right direction as far as you can tell? And from a product management standpoint, we're answering the question, should we build it? But part of the question, should we build it, we need to know, like, well, how do you make that decision? We talk about at KaiRise, we talk about really there's kind of four key areas that you need to understand when you decide, should we build it? But one of those is, do you understand the outcome you're trying to reach? The first one's like the problem you're trying to solve, and the proof, and but part of it is this idea of what's the outcome? How will we know we've solved a problem? And when you can get a team like focusing on like, are we going to solve that problem? Then it's less about, oh, we had 100 points or 1 point, and more about, I don't know how many things it's going to take, but I do know that we solved that problem. And then the final P is like proof. How will you like prove? That's the metric side. How will you know you do it? So I think we kind of move away from does an AI agent get graded in points or lines of code? Those are output type things, and move to outcomes. And I think that's a good thing for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the point about solving problems, right? Because a lot of teams that we've talked to, like when we talk to them, we try to say like, all right, what are you building? Why are you building it? And who are you building it for, right? And a lot of times it's like, well, we got these great ideas. We want to add these new features and we want to change these features to do this. And we're always like, okay, so why are you doing that? Did your users say this was something they wanted? Did they say this was like something they were having trouble with? And they're just like, no, just seems like it'd be a cool thing to build. And I'm just like, no, don't do that. Don't do that.
Well, I think
Yes,
that's
right.
that is the AI challenge. I think
Yeah.
I can get 100 ideas while we're talking in the next minute on how we could improve the next thing. Easy. But if we're not answering, and this gets back to what we mentioned earlier, like, is it going to make you more money? Is it going to deliver an outcome that is it going to solve a pain that your client has? You got the solution to eliminate that problem they have. Um, so you got to push these things through a rubric. I mean, we will never end in all of the things we could do. And to Mike's point, it's should we, and the should we has to have some gates to figure out where do we spend our time and money.
And to be fair, we haven't even caught ourselves like overbuilding stuff because it's just like so addicting, right? It's like I think Mike, we had this conversation that it's like gambling with tokens, right? So it gives you like this feeling that you're doing a lot, and because we have been caught in this, like I remember thinking this and I ended up posting it, that the most important skill in software development of our generation won't be to build new products, but rather when to stop building, and and it's like such like a weird thing because it's going completely against the grain, right? It's like no. Like, yeah, building is okay, but when do we stop? Like when is enough? When a product is enough? When a product is like enough to just keep making money without spending like all these millions in engineering and all that, right? It's one of those cases that we always think, and in our own experience too, like right now nobody knows like how to properly use like points anymore or anything like that. Everybody's like, yeah, we're going to use the same, just like higher numbers, and some people kind of adapted, and Gary Tan, the president of Y Combinator, he was like, no, I used line of code. And then he makes so many people angry, right? Because like, how dare you use line of code, like lines of code, that's a horrible idea, blah, 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 and like, we are in this process that I have a question for you because I feel that this even happened to us, that we are in the sphere of using agents and all that, which is like are really organizations confusing like productivity with value? Or
Well, you mean like that's the holy grail of product management. Of course, we're confusing productivity with value. By the way, if you're going to measure lines of code, why don't you just switch to number of tokens used? Why don't you just measure that?
Uber did that. It didn't work.
No, they did. And by the way, Uber, it's like, what are you trying to be creative with? I use you to get a ride from point A to point B. Okay, I got Uber Eats. Fine. Yep. But that's still bringing food from point A to point B.
Oh, we talked about this.
Yeah.
They made it so the cars are now ads for movies and Roombas and like all types of stuff. So they're making cool
Yep,
stuff.
but they use no, like $5 million in tokens to that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a lot.
Okay,
lot
like
of-
if you're telling me that you spend $5 million in tokens to change a car for a Roomba, my brother, you need to be fired.
So when you say for ads, like in the screen or on the side,
No,
what are the ads?
the car is a Roomba now, and you tap it, it brings it to Roomba.com. Or it's like when Avatar. I noticed it first when the new Avatar movie came out. I got a car coming to pick me up, and I'm like, is that like one of those flying things from Avatar? And it's got like a big banner behind it, like Avatar is
I
out
gotcha.
now. And I was like, oh, I gotta go see that movie now.
Hey, that sounds like product management was saying, does this generate revenue? And
Does this
someone said,
generate revenue?
it does. And
Yeah,
so let's
Matt
do
and
it.
movie ticket. So let's make more of it, sucker. Hey, whatever.
Paid
If
for
I
that
don't
movie
buy a
ticket
movie
that
ticket,
day.
I do think that the conversation shifts from, how do we measure productivity versus are we hitting the outcome? But I don't. That's always been a problem. That's always been a problem. People want high utilization. As long as everybody's busy, then somehow and it's like, no. We need to be. Here's like one way that KaiRise that we wondered about this was because we don't have an Uber budget. We don't like we don't have that much. So we're like kind of careful with our tokens, but we built this product called Ask Me, and what it is it's an AI rag, but we control it, and now any instructors that we work with can load up all of their information into the rag, and now they're available to answer questions via the Ask Me product, and they can rename it. It could be Ask Oscar, it could be Ask Matt. But for instructors, people like me, this is a wonderful thing to put in my course. So we started building this product, and the question became like, how much of it do we build before we put it in front of a customer? Because we could have built for 6 months, and we're like building and spending the tokens and the building, and Greg's showing me stuff, and him and I we're now 2 months down the road, and we've got the curse of context. Like we know what this is, and we're like having these deep discussions. We hadn't shown it to a customer, yet. And so I was trying to explain to a buddy of mine who's a principal at a high school, and he's like, I don't know even what you're talking about. So what we have discovered is, and we paused, and we have it in front of real customers. We actually have a customer using it in his class. The real question for us was confusing that productivity. We're very, very busy, and we think it's awesome with, like, will anybody buy it? Like, you have to get it in front of your customer. So AI has sped up our ability to do that, but we still, as humans, like, we still confuse productivity with, adding a thing of value. So for us, it was like, let's get it in front of customers as soon as possible. And we're coming to market with it right now. This is something we can make available to people if they want to have themselves kind of a digital clone of themselves. Mine's called Ask Mike. And you come to my website, you can visit, and you can ask me a question anytime via chat, and it responds just from my content, my course content that we train people on. Now, unlike going to ChatGPT, where it's going to give you, well, I don't know what it's going to give you. It's going to give you whatever content it can find and then make stuff up. Mine is like, no kidding, it's just my content. And we have that product now available to others. But that's how we kind of thought about bringing that forward.
I think so. That's actually like, oh, Oscar, you want to say something?
Yeah, this story came up to my mind when you were explaining this, but we haven't talked this about in the podcast, but me and Matt, we have talked about this thing called AI psychosis, which is that if you talk to anybody outside our world about AI, they will just look at you like, what are you even talking about, right? And one not funny but weird thing that we found is that just in these last 4 months, we have seen founders and teams more burn out completely than before, just because they confuse being busy with bringing value. So they are like not sleeping, like, and I'm going to throw even Gary Tan here under the bus. I know he will block me probably after this because he doesn't like people who say anything about him. But I feel there's at the record, he posted that he's going to get a divorce. And I think literally there's a correlation between his post of, I haven't slept in 3 days for like just being with Cloud Code and all these agents all day, to a few months later getting a divorce, right? And it's like we're literally confusing that being busy means building something of value, and it's like, bro, go touch some grass. Like, leave the computer, please. Like, you need it, like, there's a lot of cases like this happening right now, which is insane because we imagine that by being more productive, we'll have more free time, and we ended up stuck on the opposite side.
I think that exemplifies the exact challenge that we're talking about. AI lets you build as much as you want, and you can have a list of 100 things that need to get built. But we really need to move our attention to more of that product management view of how do we deliver value? What is the value? Who am I delivering to? Um, that was a challenge before AI, and AI just accelerates that even more. I think that's a huge challenge. So, um, and we're all in the same boat. We all have to figure out how to address what are the right things that we should build. And is it aligned with the vision, the mission? Is it delivering value to our clients, etc.?
Yeah, no, totally agree. So teams traditionally have always blamed capacity, but AI takes that excuse away, basically. So let's talk about building the right software. So why, in your opinion, do so many companies build features that customers never wanted? I know we've touched on this a bit, so maybe if you have any additional insight on why this happens, because this happens more now than ever, but it has happened in the past as well.
Well, I think you guys gave an example of building things because we've thought it would be cool. Um, if I put in the government space hat, it was, well, someone spent 2 years prior to releasing that contract building out the requirements. Well, it has changed. There is no doubt about it. So when it shows up, everybody's scratching their head wondering who's this for? It's 3 years late. And in this day and age, that's an eternity. That's a forever time. And I know Mike and I have all had those. I mean, we've had experiences of building products, delivering to the client, they put it on the shelf and it never gets deployed, which is terrible. That's a huge waste of money, right? And I think that because we can talk with our AIs and get giant lists of the things that we could build, does not mean it's going to satisfy what a customer is looking. We may think it's cool with our engineering hat on, but the client may find that that's just not practical, valuable, useful. So Mike.
I think that we talked about this earlier, that lots of, if you're working with AI to come up with ideas, it can be great, but also remember, AI is very helpful and sometimes over helpful. So you know how it is, right? You get to the end of your chat and it's like, oh, would you like me to do this next? And you're like, I hadn't thought of that. We should totally do that next. And then it does the thing and it goes, would you like me to try that next? And you're like, yeah. And off you go, right? And then you wake up and it's 2 a.m. and you're like, I haven't eaten. What's that? Like, what's going on? So there is that like overabundance model. But but two thoughts on like why are we building things that people won't use? Like one is the sort of sunk cost fallacy. This has always existed. Well, we spent a year building this and at $1.2 million, like I can't possibly scrap Microsoft Office Clippy. Are you kidding me? Like we totally have to put Clippy out because we've been working on it so long. So there's sunk cost fallacy. The Agilist, the lowercase a Agilist in the room says ignore sunk costs or pivot without mercy. Like how much did you spend? I don't actually care. But the second thing, and I think that this is back to what I was mentioning earlier, is you just get lost in the curse of context. It sounds good to me, but I forgot to check with any real customer. There's a wonderful, I can't remember the exact book title. This might be the title. I think it's called The Mom Test. It's about making sure you put your products in front of people that could actually use it. Like, don't give you the stuff that you built to your mom. She's always going to tell you it's good. Like, so make sure when you I say put it in front of people, it's not your mom. Put it in front of people that will be honest with you. It's probably not your coworkers. It's probably not them. It might not even be like your client who's writing the check. It's probably the user, right? So get your product to the user as soon as possible, and that will help prevent a lot of this.
Yeah. So to touch on your point, I when you were talking about the abundance problem, with Claude or GPT or whatever, I'm thinking back and I do have flashbacks to myself having entire conversations with Claude or whoever, and I give them an idea and they're like, "You want to do this?" I'm just like, "Yes." And then I do it, and you're like, "You want to do this?" "Yes." It's like yes, just and then it's done. I'm like, okay, cool. So one thing I'm thinking, right, is because a lot of people who watch this podcast, a lot of people who we interact with, right, they do have like organizational problems that they bring to us, and we do also agree that AI is more than just engineering; it's planning. It can solve bigger problems. And is there any organizational problem that AI can't solve, in your opinion?
Sure. I think the interpersonal relationships amongst team members, how do you get people aligned? How are we pulling on the same side of the rope? How do we work together? How do we smooth out all of those things? Um, aren't necessarily just a mechanical workflow or something that you're submitting a form on, right? So the human relation is something I think that's challenging for AI to help. It might give you suggestions on what you could do as an individual to work with someone, but you still got to execute on those things.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think that it can give you suggestions, but you still have to decide, which is coming back to something that we started earlier, right? Pressure is on leaders. Like you used to be able to take your time, and those engineers are going to take 6 months to build the thing before I got to tell them the next thing. No, that so I think if anything, AI increases the pressure. It doesn't necessarily solve that. It actually makes it harder to be a leader today for any organization that's trying to earn a buck out there.
Yeah, the decision is key. The human element are things like the empathy, judging trade-offs, prioritizations. AI can help you in those concepts to trigger some thoughts, but somebody's going to have to make choices. You know.
Yeah. Well, the name of the podcast is Human in the Loop, so it's I totally agree with both
Yeah.
the things that you
We
said.
literally started the podcast because of that, because we saw a lot of like misinformed people talking about like, especially because of these dumb videos on YouTube about like, oh, I fire my whole marketing team and now Cloud does everything, and it's like, we know it sucks. Like your marketing sucks. That's we know is Cloud is doing everything for you. Like it's very clear. Like you need to say that to us. Like it's obvious, right?
It's just like we know. we can see it. Okay, so I guess Greg, if you had to pick one engineering metric that correlates to customer value, what would you pick?
An engineering metric that represents customer value?
Yeah, is there any that you would consider, or do engineering metrics only like describe engineering proficiency?
No, I think there's some. Well, I guess it depends on what do we call engineering metrics, but I think there's some that kind of in an indirect way might be like if you've got a lot of uh, churn, defects, bugs, complaints, people coming in, those kinds of metrics and data is going to tell you something about what you delivered. Um, uh, I don't know. Those would probably be the top ones on the top of mind of what might tell you something from an engineering perspective. I actually, and maybe an aside, but I'll throw it out there. Maybe we can pick up on it later. Is um, I do think that engineering needs to get more in tune with product management. They need to understand the vision and where we're going. And the more that they can, the better off they're going to be able to deliver value, I think.
I think I agree with that. I think rework is one of the biggest time sinks right now in this current industry because you just ship things so fast. Like a product team will say, "Oh, we want to build this thing." You build it, and then they come back. Oh, wait, no, we want to change it.
Yeah, that kills you. But really, fundamentally, if you got to get to the root causes of why does that happen, and it's in product discovery. It's so why did we think that that's what they wanted, and yet when you got it in front of them, that wasn't what they wanted. And so how do you address those challenges? And those are you got to put your product hat on.
Well, we can try to wrap this up really quick. I really appreciate both your guys' times, Mike and Greg from KaiRise. Maybe we'll have a part 2 sometime in the future, because this has been a very fruitful discussion. I really appreciate having you guys on the podcast. You got anything you want to say before we close out?
I just would jump in. Was that to Oscar? I'm sorry, man.
No, that was to you and Greg.
I was going to just build on something Greg said. Well, it may not be an engineering metric. It's our belief that not just engineers, but people who are creating products in today's environment, whether you're a software developer using an AI agent, maybe you've got Claude embedded in Cursor, or whatever you're doing, or if you're even sort of on the team that's doing that, because it could be designers too, right? It could be the sort of user experience people as well. We believe that people need to get smarter about product management. It's kind of like, is everyone a product manager? And you'll hear that. Like, if you're reading any of the product management space, really people need to get smarter about product management, and that can be very exciting. I mentioned at the top of the hour that the ads for Scrum Master is dropping, but guess what? The ads for product manager is rising. Okay, I'm not saying project manager. I'm saying product manager. Big difference. Well, we believe that that's so important that we built a custom course for product managers at KaiRise. It's a fully self-paced certified product management course, and it's got my Ask Me interaction in it, so that every learner gets a customized, personalized journey through the course. At the beginning, you tell us who you are, what your goals are, what your pains are, what you're hoping to get out of the course, what you would do for a living, all of that. And then as you're going through the interactions, they're tailored to your environment. You get real specific advice you can put to work the next day in your environment. It's fresh off the presses. And we're excited to bring that forward. We want to offer your listeners a discount on that. We'll have a discount code available here to you, and we can do that. We think people need to get certified as product managers.
No, I totally agree. I appreciate the discount code in the pitch, in the plug. Oscar and I have been saying it for a while now, at least like a couple months, that like product management is the new moat almost. Like it's more important than engineering almost.
That's so interesting you said. I was just going to say, I think that choosing what not to build is becoming the competitive advantage. It sounds crazy, but you could just swirl and use a gazillion tokens just making stuff that people didn't want.
Yeah.
And feel nice about it, even if it does nothing good, right?
Cool. Well, thanks.
Well, awesome. Thanks, guys. That was fun. Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks so much. Have a good day.